to talk a little bit about how does AI impact product definition and monetization and pricing. So, and specifically around B2B, right? There's a lot of talk right now about traditional B2B pricing is usually seat-based or license-based. Yeah. And so I'd love to get your perspective, and obviously I have...
Yeah, I could talk about this for a long time. Just the real headlines is it's changing it. AI is changing B2B SaaS pricing quite a bit. And the headline is that, you know, the primary seat-based pricing metric is going away for a couple of reasons. Not that I was a big fan of it anyway. The reason why software uses seat-based license is because it's easy and customers understand it. And at Leverage Point, that's how we sold it, right? You know, you just have to do what customers expect you to do. But there's a lot of problems with that, and that's why there's such a thing as value pricing. But what AI is doing is it's changing the economics of software. So where software has had really high margins of 80–90%, and the incremental cost of adding a user was like nearly zero, right? There were great profit margins. AI has cut those in half, okay? And why? It's because of the IT costs for running the LLMs. Every API call costs money, right? So if you're building on top of that, you know, so that's going to be another pressure for product managers is really get that in line. So how are companies addressing that? Just really quick, one major way is to go back to an old type of pricing methodology, which is cost plus, and you may have heard it as usage, right? So there's a lot of, so I think 3 out of 4 companies I heard recently in the software space has changed their pricing in the last year. And they've adopted usage because they had to. So that's where you have, and it comes in a lot of different flavors and forms. All right, so that's what's driving it. It's the economics are really driving that. Hopefully those economics will get better when all that new capacity comes online. That would be really interesting to see, but I don't know. The other thing, and I think is very hopeful, is that there has also been companies adopting what's called outcome-based pricing, right? Now, outcome-based pricing is a form of value-based pricing. And I know Neil and I can have a really good discussion about this. But that, and I think that's really great news because it gets closer to the value prop. It's basically paying for results. And companies have started to do that. And you'll see that, you know, whether it's the number of, you know, service calls resolved or the number of qualified leads or whatever. And I think that's going to be something that product managers are going to really need to figure out is what those outcomes are going to be. And I think in the mastermind session, that's what I'm going to suggest. What are those outcomes that you're going to be driving for in your particular product?
Gary? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What's the difference between value-based pricing and outcome-based pricing?
Sorry. Yeah, and part of it is, in some ways, it's very similar. To be very honest, you know, focusing on value. Well, value is the outcomes you deliver. So in some cases, I see it as just a matter of semantics in terms of. But the interesting thing is, I'd love to talk to Ed offline about this. Is how do you measure those outcomes? And not only that. You know, value-based pricing has been around for 30 years. That's the concept, longer. But how do you track the value? How do you agree on the value? How do you share data around it? There's an awful lot of trust that has to be that, okay, we are going to share the number of calls we resolve or revenue generated. Okay, is how much of that is the contribution of your product versus the fact I did a brilliant job, and how do we divide that up? So
yeah, it's a deep topic. I'll just disagree slightly about the difference between outcome and value. I see an outcome as sort of fulfilling a KPI of some sort, like we're going to reduce the number of unresolved calls, right? Now, does that have a what is a value of impact? For a value-based pricing consultant, that impact has a direct line to profitability. How much more money did I make because I've used your product, right? And that can happen because I've reduced cost in some way, I'm not spending as much money, or I've improved top-line revenue, right? Attribution is always been the big, hairy issue, and it will be with outcome pricing. That doesn't go away. But attribution it can be mitigated, can be managed, expectations can be set, and that's the difference. So I think what's nice about outcome is it gets you closer, much closer than the seat-based or the deal-based things.
On the other hand, you can't have value without having outcomes.
Absolutely.
So
Totally
in some
agree.
ways, they're in the same ballpark, if you will.
Yep.
But yeah, in order to have outcome, and basically, to summarize what I think you're saying, Ed, which I agree with, is that outcomes lead to value. And by saying, all right, here's an outcome, we increased the number, or we decreased the unresolved calls.
Yeah.
What does that mean in terms of customer retention? What does customer retention mean in terms of increased revenue, among other things?
And it's
So-
it's a hard thing to do. Let me just say, it is a hard